Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where I talk about whatever the hell I want. And this is a very special double segment episode in honor of me finally wrapping up my year and a half journey through the filmography of John Ford, which my buddy Griff here has been a very pleasurable partner along the way for. And segment number one is my all-time great segment, and we're going to talk about some reasons why John Ford's an all-time great. Griff, thank you so much for coming on.
Shane, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you coming on for some of the films because I know you're a big John Ford fan. I think you're the only one of my friends that really was familiar with his filmography. So you obviously brought a lot to those episodes. And let's start off by saying, so I know your first big point was like John Ford was always working to make a film of art. And it wasn't just like we're making a movie.
hmm Yes, there was definitely a lot that went into it. The cinematography, the
Mm.
performances, points that he was trying to convey. In fact, I read somewhere that John Wayne once said that Westerns are movies that are closer to art than any other movies in the business. And I think that John Ford's movies, particularly those Westerns that he made with John Wayne, really
Mm.
solidified that.
I think it's the kind of film where if you're out in the West, there's a lot that you can take in and leverage. And I think it was always great that he shot on location for a lot of his films. I know that waned kind of towards the end, but people get older and struggle with that kind of like making a film's a lot. But
hmm
films like The Searchers, it's one of the most gorgeous looking films ever put on a big screen. And I would love someday to see that on a big screen, but just the cinematography and how everything is shot. You like reading his book Pappy about him. There's definitely like some films you knew like I was just here to make, but some of those things like I was here to make something special. Even like I know he talks so highly about his film The Fugitive with Henry Fonda, which is a very gorgeous and very artful kind of film, even if like narratively it's a little loose, but like most people wouldn't expect that from John Ford, but that's the approach that he wanted to bring. Was he knew that this was an art form and was really trying to leverage that.
hmm I remember seeing The Fugitive with Henry Fonda one time
Yeah.
on TCM. Yeah, even though it was a gorgeous looking movie, like you said, Shane, I wasn't a big fan of that one. I thought it was a little bit sad, but going back to The Searchers, it's
Mm.
definitely one of my favorite westerns, probably one of my favorite John Ford movies, if not my most favorite John Ford movie, mainly because it's probably the most influential Western out there. It definitely influenced movies like Star Wars and even
Yeah.
Taxi Driver.
Absolutely, and it's in Martin Scorsese's top five favorite films. Um, and it's there for a reason. Like every shot is so particular, it's so gorgeous, the colors, like watching a film like The Quiet Man and just being engulfed in this color is just absolutely gorgeous. And obviously, he had a lot of love for his Irish heritage, and he really wanted to show just how beautiful a country it was. Just looking at how bright Maureen O'Hara's just like hair popping on screen and just green fields. It was an absolutely gorgeous experience.
If I'm not mistaken with The Quiet Man, I think that Republic Studios were reluctant to let John Ford make that movie. So I
Mm.
think the reason why he made Rio Grande was so that he could go to Ireland to make The Quiet Man. And it's funny because when I first saw The Quiet Man, I wasn't a huge fan of it at the
Mm.
beginning, but then when I watched it a second or third time, I really enjoyed it. Very, very good movie. And it's also funny too because my dad, who also liked the movie, he made a joke about it, saying, "Yeah, there should be a sequel called The Loud Man."
Yeah, I don't think John Wayne was very quiet in that movie.
No, no, that's the irony. That's
Yep.
the irony of it.
He talks with his fists too. Little boxing
hmm
bruiser we got there. But no, it just so many of his films are absolutely gorgeous. And you could definitely tell that he really helped bring film forward. And I think it's lost on a lot of film lovers today just how influential he was. But I think that's another really important point to think about. And I didn't technically have this on my notes, but kind of building off of this is just how influential John Ford was. There's so many filmmakers that were inspired by his work. Just watch The Fablemans. You'll learn about Horizons and how
Yeah,
ones in the middle are boring as shit.
I didn't see the Fablemans, but I did see that particular clip.
Yeah,
And in the Peter Bogdanovich documentary directed by John Ford, Spielberg mentioned how he met John Ford, and Ford invited Spielberg into his office, and Ford had Spielberg, look at all these paintings, mostly Western paintings, and
yeah.
Ford kept asking Spielberg, "Where's the horizon? Where's the horizon?" And to put it in a nutshell, Ford said to Spielberg, like, "Oh yeah, if you could make a movie with the horizon in the middle of the screen rather than at the top or the bottom, then maybe you could make a good movie. Now get out of here."
Which I didn't recognize this reference, but having watched having watched The Quiet Man now and rewatching E.T., that moment where like he whips the girl and like pulls her in with that whole like strange sequence where the wind's blowing in and all that. That's literally right from The Quiet Man. That was like
Mhm.
beat for beat a shot of John Wayne doing that to Maureen O'Hara, and
Right.
just so many of those shots, and you see those kinds of influences, especially in Scorsese's films, and him mentioning in his top five favorite films, The Searchers, it's obvious. You see that kind of influence. And you see like I feel like when you look back at westerns, there's kind of like two tracks for influence. There's the John Ford Western, and then there's the spaghetti Western, which
Yes.
you had the spaghetti westerns that Sergio Leone made, and obviously Clint Eastwood was much more influenced by that, having worked in those films and stuff like that. And he kind of carried that kind of sensibility forward. But if you watch any big classic western, it's like it lives in a world where John Ford helped make it. And that's something special. He was such a visionary director, and the way he shot action, like watching Stagecoach and just looking at the stunts, like action directors today, I am sure stunt coordinators look back and look at the crazy stuff that he did in movies, because people weren't making action like that,
No.
and he made it in the 1930s. Like if you watch that climactic carriage chase in Stagecoach chase in Stagecoach, there's something really special there. So, John Ford, whether you know it or not, some of your favorite movies probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for John Ford, because he influenced those films.
Yeah, I agree. The stunt coordinator on Stagecoach, Yakima Canutt, he was actually the same stunt coordinator for Ben-Hur.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. And that's a nice long career doing some stunt work.
Actually Yakima Canutt's son Joe also became a stunt coordinator. Yeah, I forgot to mention it when we were talking about Ben-Hur, when Heston and Canutt were talking about the chariot race. Canutt just said to Heston, "Chuck, just stay in the chariot. You're gonna win the damn race."
That's how they wrote it. That's what's going to happen. So there you go. Yeah, all he had to do was stay on the carriage. Other people got through them and trampled.
Hmm.
So scary. I think this is a nice segue into, there's so much influence by John Ford. He is so influential. He defined a whole genre of cinema. Like the Western would not be this fixture of great American filmmaking if it weren't for John Ford.
Yeah, Scorsese once said that basically every filmmaker today has been influenced by Ford, whether they know it or not.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's like he's kind of like the Beatles, where it's like you might not say you're a Beatles fan, but I'm sure you like music that was influenced by the Beatles. Because you have to have somebody revolutionize an art. and
Yes.
then spawned so much. And you can see it in so many westerns or big epics. And the western, I know it's not in the best shape today. And we're basically at the point where it's not a main fixture of modern cinema, but every so often we get a great one. And whether it's like, I know I absolutely love what the Coens do in terms of westerns and neo westerns, like their adaptation of True Grit, which is very true to Portis's novella. But the western was such a big part of film from the 19 teens, probably into the 60s. I feel like once you get into the 70s, really like the only huge name in westerns was Clint Eastwood. But up to that point, like John Ford spent decades being like the defining figure in westerns. And if you thought about westerns, like they were compared to John Ford films.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned Clint Eastwood before. Also, John Wayne did a few westerns early on in the 70s. You know, Chisholm, Rio Lobo, Cahill, U.S. Marshal. He did the sequel to True Grit, Rooster Cogburn.
Yep. And then wound up ending with the shootist.
Right, yeah, Shooters was
Obviously.
great. Hmm.
So, and it just when you're a director that you defined a whole genre of filmmaking, that's pretty legit. And not
Yes.
many filmmakers can say that. There's some horror filmmakers that have really defined that genre. There's so well, I don't think there's a whole lot of filmmakers in fantasy that have really defined fantasy as a genre. Because it's so damn hard to actually make work. But you have sci-fi filmmakers that there's specific people in the history of film that like that genre, you think of that person. And who do you think of when it comes to westerns? It's John Ford, John Wayne, Sergio Leone, and Clint Eastwood.
Hmm.
Like you're there, literal Mount Rushmore of
Yeah.
westerns, and John Ford's face would be right there at the front, and you deserve it. And speaking to this next point too, this man made movies from the 19 teens until the 1960s. That's insane. That is a long time to be making films consistently because like he didn't take like big breaks. Even when he was in the military, he was there to make movies. So like it's incredible the longevity that he had. And technically, he made 140 films. It's just 60 of them are lost, and I couldn't do episodes on them.
Yeah, all the silent movies he did early on, documentaries. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I don't think there's going to be a director like that with his kind of longevity since. I mean, there's a few out there who are trying to, live up to that, but I don't think it'll ever match Ford's.
Well, and at least not consistently too, because like we have Scorsese and we have Spielberg,
Yes.
who are two, and Ridley Scott, like you mentioned before we started recording, like these are directors that have been doing this for decades. Ridley Scott's probably the one that works the most because like he at least consistently has movies coming out, and he still has years we has two come out, which is wild for 80 something year old man. And even Clint Eastwood. I'm not even thinking about Clint. We already mentioned him. He's been directing films since the 1970s. He's been directing films since right around when Spielberg was, let alone how early before that he was actually in films and television. And we might have seen his last film with Juror Number Two, which is that's a sad notion. Things coming to an end, but just the way that John Ford he made so many movies, and he was still making films multiple a year into the 60s, and that's wild.
Yeah, I know that he wanted to make even more movies, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, poor health prevented him from doing that.
Yeah, I know in his book Pappy it was the poor health and the combination of like after like Seven Women and Cheyenne Autumn, not a whole lot of people were coming to him for opportunities. And I know Cheyenne Autumn was supposed to be like this big, like this is my I don't think at the moment he knew it was going to be his last Western, but like it felt like. it had that kind of vibe that like he knew going out, this could be the last time he was going out with that genre. It's very odd that his last movie was Seven Women, which I just watched this past weekend. It was his last feature film. But the fact that like he did so much over this course of time and he went through so many eras of filmmaking. Just imagine how different was film in 1916 and 1965. Worlds apart.
Yeah, yeah, apples and oranges, no sound, I would say too during the 19 teens and I guess into the 1920s, I don't think there was a huge emphasis on, acting, the craft of acting and so on. But Shane, going back to Cheyenne Autumn, I haven't seen the movie yet. I've been really considering watching it. Is that something you'd recommend?
I think there's parts of it that are fantastic. I also think it's really long. And there's like obvious scenes that should be completely cut from the movie. Like there's a whole entire Dodge City sequence. Like it has Wyatt Earp in it, played by Jimmy Stewart, which
Right,
like
right.
that sounds like, oh, that's cool, but it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. And like the whole movie like screeches to a halt. I think it has enough merit to be worth watching. It just might feel a little long in the middle there, but then it pulls you right back in because it has an amazing cast too. Um, like some of the supporting characters outside of Jimmy Stewart, like E.G. Robinson, Carl Malden. It has even has like Ricardo Montalban playing one of the Cheyenne leaders and stuff like that, which was very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know he was in it. I remember hearing that Jimmy Stewart was Wyatt Earp in the movie, and weren't Richard Widmark and Carol Baker in it too?
So though they are the leads of the film. And I thought he was like a real solid leading man. Like it's hard when so many John Ford films were led by John Wayne or Henry Fonda. When you go in a different direction with a different lead, like he did films with Spencer Tracy, he did films with so many, like he did a few films with E.G. Robinson too. One where he was the lead, and I think Widmark was. I think he does a fine job, kind of like anchoring the film down. Um, that's the biggest thing I'll say is it's a little long, and it probably could have been tightened a little, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. Especially, I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
And then I think the last thing to bring up is his films were about people and a lot of different types of people, a lot of people that weren't easy to root for. And it was very interesting seeing some really iconic characters, whether it's, Ethan Edwards from The Searchers, and I'm blanking on the name of Fonda's character from Grapes of Wrath. But like all these characters were have become iconic fixtures in American cinema. And it's because they're so interesting and dynamic and they aren't just like cookie cutter archetypes of characters.
Hmm. Yeah, and My Darling Clementine, another favorite John Ford movie of mine. It wasn't your stereotypical good guy versus bad guy Western. There
Yep.
was a real human story to it too.
Tom Joad, Henry Fonda's character from Grapes of Wrath. Um, and I know one particular other example, Fort Apache, with Captain York that John Wayne played, and Lieutenant Colonel Thursday. Henry Fonda was quite an antagonistic character in this, which was strange for me. I like because like I legitimately thought it wasn't until like Once Upon a Time in the West where they got Henry Fonda to play a villain.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, it's like Thursday isn't like that's the thing. He's complicated. Like for a decent chunk of the film, you do see him as like, yeah, he's this guy who lives by the rules, but he gets pushed a little far and does some not great things. And he very much represented Custer and like his last stand and everything like that, which
Ru-
was very interesting. Also, shocking to see Shirley Temple as an adult. That was strange for
Yeah.
me. Watching this movie, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, why she look familiar? But I'm like, wait. And then I looked up and saw Shirley Temple was in it. And I'm like, that was a surprise. But no, so there's some really great films with some really interesting characters that he created.
Yeah, yeah. His legacy will definitely live on. There's no question about that.
Even something like I really enjoyed Three Godfathers. I thought
Yeah,
that
I do
was such a
see.
fun film. Would recommend. And the film Tokyo Godfathers by Satoshi Kon, which is a anime from like 97, is definitely a remake of that. And like you still see his stories popping up. And people like Taylor Sheridan 100% were influenced by John Ford. And you see that living on today. And that's interesting and exciting. This was a big commitment, Griff, but it was worth the journey. So I did 80 John Ford films, and it was a very interesting ride, and I appreciated you being a part of it.
Yeah, it was definitely great to be on that journey with you, Shane, because, I've been watching Westerns pretty much all my life, and John Ford and John Wayne were both definitely a huge part of it. Because, that was it's always been one of my big hobbies, even when I was a
Mhm.
little kid, I used to come home from school and, watch, a John Wayne Western, a Jimmy Stewart Western, a
Mhm.
Gary Cooper Western, it's a pastime for me.
There you go. But Griff, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about John Ford with me.
Thank you, Shane.
And all of you out there, make sure to stay tuned because in a minute we'll be shifting gears and you'll be hearing from me ranking my 79 films that I had watched up to this point of recording of John Ford's I Still Have Chesty, a tribute to a legend, my last
Oh,
episode. So, and then I'll be jumping into Wes Anderson. So, something completely different. But
mm.
yeah, so stay tuned.
Welcome to part two of my special Wasteland Talks talk show with my double segments for this week. And this is ranking of John Ford's filmography, as I have 79 films to rank for you here. We're going to go pretty quickly through most of them. As, to be honest, I've been doing this for a year and a half. Some of them I don't remember a whole lot, but it is an interesting exploration and what we're going to be able to do here, tying together with my all-time great discussion with my buddy Griff. So I hope you enjoyed part one, and now here's part two, ranking of John Ford's filmography. At 79, we have Hell Bent from 1918. Number 78, The Craving from 1918. 77, The Village Blacksmith from 1922. 76, Cameo Kirby from 1923. 75, The Brat from 1931. Torpedo Squadron at 74 from 1942. We have number 73, Straight Shooting from 1917. 72, The Black Watch from 1929. 71, Men Without Women from 1930. 70, It's Steamboat Round the Bend from 1935. We have 69, Judge Priest from 1934. 68, North of the Hudson from 1923. 67, Up the River from 1930. 66, which is Seas Beneath from 1931. 1965's Dr. Bull from 1933. 64's Gideon's Day from 1958. We have 63, By Indian Post from 1919. 62, The World Moves On from 1934. 61, December 7th from 1943. 60, Bucking Broadway from 1917. Number 59, The Prisoner of Shark Island from 1936. Number 58, Just Pals from 1920. 57 is Upstream from 1927. Number 56 is Mary of Scotland from 1936. Number 55, Four Men and a Prayer from 1938. 54, Sex Hygiene from 1942. 53 is Airmail from 1932. 52 is Wee Willie Winkie from 1937. Got some Shirley Temple there. 51 is Submarine Patrol from 1938. 50 is Tobacco Road from 1941. We have 49 is The Wings of Eagles from 1957. 48, The Last Western, Cheyenne Autumn from John Ford. We have 47 is The Battle of Midway from 1942, a big hit as he highlighted the battle in World War II. 46 is The Rising of the Moon from 1957. 45, we have The Shamrock Handicap from 1926. 44, we have The Blue Eagle from 1926. 43, It's Your America from 1946. 42, This is Korea from 1951. 41, The Sun Shines Bright from 1953. 40, The Hurricane from 1937. Incredible special effects. Number 39, When Willie Comes Marching Home from 1950. Very crazy twist in the third act in terms of how that story goes. 38, The Growler Story. A nice little dramatization. 37, Two Rode Together. Got some Jimmy Stewart there from 1961. 36 is Three Bad Men from 1926. 35, Born Reckless from 1930. 34, Kentucky Pride from 1925. 33, The Plow and the Stars from 1936. 32, How Green Was My Valley from 1941, a big Best Picture winner. Number 31, one of John Ford's favorites, an art house film, The Fugitive, starring Henry Fonda from 1947. Number 30, What Price Glory from 1952. 29, we're going off to Africa to Mungambo from 1953 with Clark Gable. 28, The Last Hurrah from 1958. Got some Spencer Tracy there. 27, Donovan's Ree from 1963. If you could take that good old boomer humor, it's plenty of laughs for sure. 26, At the Front in North Africa with the U.S. Army. Probably his best war documentary. 27, Seven Women, 1965, his last feature film before retirement. 24, The Quiet Man from 1952, John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, absolutely drop-dead gorgeous film. Number 23 is The Lost Patrol from 1934. What a very tense and lean thriller. 22, The Whole Town's Talking, some great E.G. Robinson and some good humor. We have 21 is Aerosmith from 1931, very well directed and unexpected depth here. 20, Young Mr. Lincoln from 1939, good Henry Fonda performance. 19 is Mr. Roberts. Henry Fonda is back again from 1955. And Jack Lemmon, great standout here. 18, The Horse Soldiers with John Wayne and William Holden from 1959. 17, Drums Along the Mohawk from 1939. Fonda leading this frontier western. Number 16, The Long Voyage Home from 1940. This great film going across the Atlantic. Plenty of danger. 15, The Long Gray Line from 1955. A great story with Tyrone Power about an immigrant and his wife Maureen O'Hara. 14, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, one of the best John Wayne performances in his career. 13, Three Godfathers from 1948. Just that trio of these outlaws who have to take in a baby across the desert. 12, The Informer from 1935. Intense, beautifully shot. Victor McLaughlin, amazing performance. 11, Four Sons from 1928. This great German story about brothers going off to war. Number 10, They Were Expendable from 1945. John Wayne leads an intense and grueling war film here. 9, My Darling Clementine from 1946. Another great John Wayne cavalry western. We have number 8, Rio Grande from 1950. 7, one of my big surprises here, Wagon Master from 1950. Great Ward Bond leading performance here. Fantastic. It's a lean one. Definitely has some really interesting characters and dynamics. We have number 6, Fort Apache from 1948. Henry Fonda in the antagonistic role, in this Custard type role, and John Wayne. Very interesting dynamic between them. Number 5, Sergeant Rutledge from 1960. Great courtroom drama with great direction. Woody Strode, fantastic performance. Number 4, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This trio of John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, and Lee Marvin. Absolutely fantastic. Throw in Vera Miles as well. Really great black and white shot. And now we're really in the here with number 3, Stagecoach from 1939. Impeccable Western, great star-making performance for John Wayne, and a whole great group of characters from Thomas Mitchell as well as a big standout. Number 2, The Grapes of Wrath from 1940, this fantastic film. Henry Fonda absolutely kills it. There's so much weight and emotion here. But number 1, the John Ford Western, The Searchers from 1956. Ethan Edwards, one of the most interesting characters ever in Western films, and just John Wayne gives the best performance of his career. Jeffrey Hunter is great, Vera Miles is great, Ward Bond is great, and you just have this sprawling Western with good humor, great thrills, and complexity here all along the way. But those are my rankings of 79. You heard it, 79 John Ford films. What a year and a half journey this has been. Thank all of you who have gone on this journey with me, and all of my wonderful friends and collaborators, and my wife, who've jumped in and done plenty to join me for all of these episodes. I cannot wait to start Wes Anderson, one of my favorite directors, but it was an eye-opening and great experience getting to see the evolution of one of the most impressive longevity filmmakers in the history of cinema from the 19-teens until the 1960s. John Ford is a legend. And hope you enjoyed part 1 with Griff talking about why he's an all-time great. And hopefully you can go check out some of these films. There's plenty of them that are definitely worth your time. But thank you, as always, for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.